In the living room, where soft spring sunlight streamed in, I was holding a cherished family photograph. The row of picture frames on the mantelpiece quietly told the story of our family history. Eric's birth, his first field day, last year's Christmas. Each moment was engraved as an irreplaceable memory. In the photo, my husband Michael, our son Eric, and I were beaming with smiles. It was taken last summer at our cottage in Greenwich. As I gazed at the photo, I instinctively placed my hand on my abdomen. After 5 months of pregnancy, my belly was gradually growing larger. Our family was eagerly awaiting the birth of our second child. "Mom, I'm home." As usual, Eric had returned from school. He ran straight to me and gave me a big hug. Despite being mindful of my belly, he told me about his day with a bright smile. "Today, I got a perfect score on my math test." "That's wonderful, Eric." I gently stroked my son's head as I headed toward the kitchen. Our after-school snack time was an important daily ritual. Homemade chocolate chip cookies and organic milk. Eric's eyes sparkled as he munched on the cookies. How blessed this everyday life was. I silently savored feelings of gratitude. On weekends, we enjoyed gardening in our spacious yard. While I tended to the flower beds, Eric observed insects or sometimes imitated me, playing with the soil using his small metal shovel. "Mom, what's the name of this flower?" "This is lavender. Can you smell its gentle fragrance?" Our conversations echoed in the garden amidst the spring air. Michael occasionally helped with the gardening when he had breaks from work. However, recently, subtle changes began to appear in our daily routine. Michael's returning time had been getting progressively later. "A big project has started. I'll be busy for a while," he explained. I could only nod at my husband's words. I understood the importance of his role as a vice president at a pharmaceutical company. Still, I couldn't help feeling a small sense of anxiety as he increasingly came home at 9 or 10 o'clock. Eric had to go to sleep more and more often without being able to say, "Good night, Daddy." As I watched my husband eating his reheated dinner alone, I wondered if I should say something. But I didn't want to worry him when he already looked so tired after finishing his meal. His phone calls had increased too. Every time the phone rang, he would leave the room. I felt something was off when he lowered his voice to speak. However, when he explained it was confidential matters, there was no room for questions. Working on weekends also became more frequent. The competition with rival companies is fierce. If we miss this opportunity, it will be taken by another company. I told myself I should be grateful for my husband's dedicated work rather than harboring doubts. However, what concerned me most was the change in Eric's behavior. He woke up crying in the middle of the night more often. When I rushed to him, Eric would say in a trembling voice that he had a scary dream. When I hugged him, he clung to me more than usual. Concerning reports from school began to arrive as well. Recently, Eric seems lost in thought during classes. He has been spending more time drawing alone rather than playing with friends, his teacher, Mrs. Watson, told me, making my heart tighten. Eric, who had always been active and popular in class, who used to play tag with everyone during recess. As I listened to the teacher's words, I desperately tried to recall my son's recent behavior. Even during morning preparations, something was different. His movements were slower when putting on his uniform, and he seemed distracted. When I asked, "Eric, are you all right?" he would only answer in a small voice, "Yes, I'm fine." What concerned me most was that Eric had stopped drawing pictures of our family. Since he was little, he loved drawing family pictures. But now, he only drew landscapes and animals. There were also subtle changes in the relationship between Michael and Eric. Eric would casually leave when his father approached. Even when invited to the park on weekends, he began refusing, saying, "I have homework." My anxiety grew day by day. I consulted with my friend Mary. "It might be the emotional ups and downs that come with his age," Mary suggested, and I desperately tried to believe her. And yet, I wondered why. On the day we learned our second child would be a girl during my prenatal checkup, tears involuntarily welled up as I saw the little life on the monitor in the examination room. But Michael's expression, as he watched the screen beside me, seemed to freeze for a moment. A girl. Something other than joy was mixed in his voice as he mumbled those words. In my estimation, perhaps my husband had hoped for a boy. As an heir to the Brown family. But was that thought correct? Something felt off. Or was it just my imagination? And then, my mother-in-law Elizabeth's visits increased. "Linda, how's your morning sickness? Are you resting well?" While outwardly concerned, her eyes seemed to be monitoring my every move, making me uncomfortable. As spring drew to a close, the anxiety in my heart grew gradually but steadily. It had become a habit for me to stand by the window at night after putting Eric to bed, gazing at the scenery outside. On full moon nights, the lavender in the garden gleamed silver. These flowers that Michael and I had lovingly planted when we first moved into this house. The happy memories of those days intertwined with my current anxieties, creating a complex knot in my heart. Was this anxiety really just my imagination? Or was I missing something important? The baby moved in my womb. That tremor felt like it was trying to tell me something. One night, I was lying alone in the bedroom. Michael had sent a curt message hours earlier saying he would be late again. "An important meeting is running long," the excuse I'd been hearing frequently lately. Under the soft light of the bedside lamp, I was reading the same page of a childcare book over and over. My eyes followed the words, but my mind was foggy, unable to absorb the content. The clock showed 11:30. Outside, thunder roared, and large raindrops hammered against the roof. Sudden storms in early summer were common in this area. The old mansion's window frames creaked, and the shadows of wind-swayed garden trees cast eerie patterns on the bedroom walls. Still, tonight's storm felt more violent than usual. Almost as if it were foreboding what was about to happen. I instinctively placed my hand on my abdomen, gently stroking to confirm the presence of the little life inside. Suddenly, Eric's scream-like voice echoed, and the bedroom door burst open. When I looked up hurriedly, Eric rushed into the room, sobbing. His small pajama-clad body was shaking violently. "Eric? What's wrong?" I immediately put the book down and reached out to him. Eric leaped into my arms without hesitation. "Were you scared?" "The thunder." Eric shook his head. At 6 years old, he had recently become able to sleep by himself. He shouldn't have been afraid of thunder anymore, but tonight he was clearly different. His small body trembled in my arms. Feeling my shirt getting wet with his tears, I gently rubbed his back. "It's all right, Mom is here." After a while, Eric's trembling gradually subsided. But his hands, tightly gripping my clothes, still didn't relax. "Did you have a bad dream?" When I asked gently, Eric slowly raised his face. He stared at me with tear-stained eyes, moved his trembling lips several times, and then suddenly blurted out, "Mom, don't have the baby." That cry shook my heart more violently than the thunder. "Why?" "Eric, the baby will be our precious family member." I tried to answer in as calm a voice as possible while hiding my agitation. However, Eric's next words froze my heart. "Dad said, you'll disappear." His confession, squeezed out in a trembling voice. My mind went blank. Did Dad say that? Eric, did Dad tell you that? No. Eric shook his head. I heard Dad and Grandma talking. At that moment, lightning flashed, illuminating the room in a bluish-white light for an instant. With the following rumble, Eric clung to me even more tightly. Eric, can you tell me what you heard? Can you tell Mom? I tried desperately to stay calm. But I could tell my voice was trembling slightly. Eric hesitated but gradually began to speak. Last week, when he was walking down the hall to go to the bathroom, he heard his father and grandmother's voices coming from the study. Dad was saying, he's going to live with a new family. My heart began to race. And he kept saying the name Kate several times. Kate? A name I didn't know. Various thoughts began to swirl in my head. When Mom has the baby, you'll have to go somewhere. Grandma said, it would be better. Eric's voice was broken. But each word sank into my heart like heavy lead. Eric, thank you for telling me. I managed a smile and gently hugged my son, being careful not to let Eric see the tears rolling down my cheeks. It's going to be all right. Mom isn't going anywhere. I'll always protect you and the baby. I wasn't sure if those words were my determination or just a wish. At that time, I couldn't quite tell. Really? Do you promise? Will you stay with us forever and ever? My son's anxious upward gaze. In his eyes, illuminated by moonlight, tears still glistened. I couldn't lie to that pure look. Eric's small hand gently touched my belly, as if trying to protect his yet unseen sister. I promise. You and this baby are Mom's precious treasures. Still embracing Eric, I lay down on the bed. My son's small body gradually relaxed. I began to hum a lullaby. The dear song I had been singing since Eric was a baby. Soon, I heard his regular breathing. His peaceful sleeping face made the earlier fear and anxiety seem like a lie. But I understood the weight of the courage he had shown me, and the deep love behind it. I desperately tried to recall my husband's recent behavior. Late returns, secretive phone calls, and that complex expression when we found out it was a girl. Everything was connecting. But I wasn't yet ready to accept that truth. Looking at Eric's sleeping face, I strengthened my resolve to protect this child, and the child in my womb, no matter what. That night, I didn't close my eyes until dawn, still holding Eric. From that day on, Eric's confession never faded from my mind, rather, it gained weight with each passing day. It was as if it had given a definite form to the discomfort I had been trying to ignore. Every morning when I woke up, my son's words from that night echoed in my head. I still couldn't fully understand what "Mom will disappear" meant. But the premonition that whatever those words pointed to was surely creeping into our daily lives grew stronger day by day. Michael's weekend work had become routine. I realized I'd stopped questioning his explanation that the important new drug development project is in its final stages. Saturday, Sunday, from early morning until late at night. Family time was gradually slipping away like sand from an hourglass. And then there were his work calls. Each time his smartphone rang, Michael invariably disappeared to his study or the garden. I could only nod silently at his "it's confidential" explanation. But the occasional soft laughter I heard didn't sound like business conversation. My mother-in-law Elizabeth's visits also increased. While outwardly showing concern for me as a pregnant woman, her sharp gaze seemed to follow my every move. "Linda, has your morning sickness subsided? Are you resting?" Despite her worried tone, her eyes seemed to hide a different intention. There was an uncomfortable feeling of being monitored whether during lunch together or when I went out. And the most concerning change was our finances. Michael suddenly began strictly limiting the use of credit cards that I had previously been free to use. It's part of the company's cost-cutting trend. We need to review our household expenses too. While feeling that explanation was odd, I couldn't pursue it deeply. However, his credit card statement still showed purchases from high-end brand stores. I began secretly recording my husband's actions. Departure and return times, destinations, frequency of calls noted in a planner. Gradually, unnatural patterns emerged. Particularly late returns every Wednesday night. Important meetings every Friday afternoon. It was around then that I consulted with my friend Mary. We sat at our usual table in a nearby cafe. It was during Eric's school hours. Gentle classical music played in the cafe. "Linda, you don't look well lately." At Mary's kind voice, I suddenly felt my eyes welling up. The anxiety I'd been carrying for weeks, unable to tell anyone, was about to overflow. "Mary. I might be crazy. But..." With trembling hands holding my coffee cup, I gradually began to talk. About Michael's changes, Eric's warning, and the growing sense of something wrong. "Linda, your intuition might be right. But you need proper evidence. You should avoid emotional actions that you might regret later." Mary's calm advice gave direction to my confused heart. Her words felt like a faint light in the darkness. The decisive turning point was a single photograph found in Michael's wallet. When tidying up laundry, a brown leather wallet fell out of his pants pocket. Inside, I casually opened it to find a picture of an unfamiliar little girl. About 3 years old, with a lovely smile. The background was a familiar park. It was Eric's favorite playground near our house. A few days after that discovery, Eric's trembling account connected all my suspicions. "Mom, I saw Dad at the park. It happened when he was playing with friends on a holiday. Michael was with an unknown woman and the little girl from the wallet photo. They looked like a harmonious family, sharing ice cream. That person called Dad Michael. And the little girl called him Daddy." Eric's testimony left a deep wound in my heart. And to make matters worse, rumors leaked from my husband's company colleagues. The reality that everyone knew about Michael's relationship with his subordinate, Kate Summers. The decisive moment was my mother-in-law's phone conversation. Elizabeth was on the phone in the garden. I was reading a book by the window, but words carried by the wind caught my ear and wouldn't let go. "Yes, I'm aware of Kate's child. If it's for Michael's happiness. Yes, I'll persuade Linda." That night, I examined Michael's credit card statements in detail. Frequent payments at children's clothing stores and toy shops. Meals at fancy restaurants. And what looked like regular rent payments for a suburban apartment. All evidence pointed to a single truth. I quietly made up my mind. On Mary's recommendation, I decided to hire a reliable private detective. The detective acted quickly. Security camera footage, department store shopping records, apartment entry records. And a series of decisive photographs. 3 people dining at a fancy restaurant. Entering an apartment. Enjoying a holiday at the zoo. The woman in the photos was undoubtedly Michael's subordinate, Kate Summers. And next to her was always the little girl from the wallet photo, Emma Summers. The detective's report contained cold facts. Kate Summers, 29. Michael's direct subordinate. Their relationship began 3 years ago, resulting in a daughter, Emma Summers. Currently 3 years old. Address, a luxury apartment in Greenwich. Monthly rent comparable to our mortgage payment. It should have been a considerable burden even for Michael's income. Photos were attached to the report. A scene from a holiday. Kate was a woman with refined beauty, looking younger than me. Dressed in a stylish dress, naturally leaning on Michael's arm. The little girl playing innocently nearby. Golden curly hair and eyes shaped like Michael's. The more I looked, the more the reality I wanted to deny gleamed brightly before my eyes. It was a moment when all questions became cruelly clear. Eric's warning, my mother-in-law's unnatural attitude, Michael's changes. And the reason for that complex expression on the day we learned our second child would be a girl. Everything spread before my eyes with the clarity of being connected by a single thread. I stood by the darkened bedroom window, holding the report. My reflection in the window revealed my increasingly pregnant figure. To protect my unborn child, and for Eric's future, what should I do next? Gently embracing my abdomen with both hands, I sighed deeply. For Eric's and this child's future. It didn't take long to find that answer. For 3 days after receiving the detective's report, I couldn't sleep. On the desk in the study, mountains of evidence I had collected were piled up. Photos from the detective, credit card statements, call records. And a copy of the apartment rental agreement. All evidence told the truth that would greatly change my life. On Mary's recommendation, I met with a female lawyer specializing in divorce issues. Jennifer Robinson, one of the most trusted lawyers in Greenwich. Her advice was precise and calm. In case of trial, evidence of infidelity plus the existence of a secret child carries significant weight. Especially birth during marriage is important. I nodded silently while taking notes. However, to be more certain, voice evidence would be perfect. If you could record statements from your husband or mother-in-law. At those words, I gasped involuntarily. Eric's testimony. His confession on that rainy night. Yes, I should have recorded that conversation. But fate was still on my side. That night, Eric visited my bedroom again. Mom, I had another scary dream. While embracing my son, I quietly activated the voice recorder on my smartphone. Eric told me in more detail about the conversation he had overheard between his father and grandmother on sleepless nights. About the new family, about a woman named Kate, and about plans to drive me out. The cruel truths narrated in a childish voice. My hands were trembling, but the recording was surely made. Next, I needed financial documents. Watching for Michael's absence, I opened the safe. The password was our wedding anniversary. Ironically, it hadn't been changed. Inside, there were more documents than I had expected. The original apartment contract, records of regular transfers to an account in Kate Summers' name, and most shockingly, a stack of drafted documents concerning Eric's custody. The date was set for a month after my expected delivery date. One Friday night when all preparations were complete. Michael had come home unusually early. I quietly approached him watching TV in the living room. We need to talk. At my voice, Michael looked puzzled. Where's Eric? He's at Mary's house for a sleepover. On the table, I laid out the evidence one by one. Photos, statements, recorded data. And finally, the stack of documents taken from the safe. I could see the blood drain from Michael's face. Explain. Everything. My voice was, surprisingly even to myself, calm. After a long silence, Michael heaved a deep sigh. Yes. It's all true. The confession that followed was crueler than I had imagined. Kate, who joined the company as a new employee 3 years ago. Their relationship started right away. When the pregnancy was discovered, Michael said he hesitated. But in the end, he chose to keep the secret. Even after giving birth, Kate never made a fuss. She understands how fatal a scandal would be for my career. After Emma was born, his double life began. A brilliant sales manager by day, family time with his mistress and her child by night. When I learned about our second child, I made a decision. I couldn't continue this life anymore. At that point, Michael momentarily choked on his words. Officially with Kate. Before those words could finish, the sound of the front door opening echoed. Michael? Linda? It was Elizabeth's voice. My mother-in-law flinched for a moment at the unusual atmosphere in the living room. However, the moment she saw the photos on the table, her expression changed. "Ah, you finally found out." There was, surprisingly, a tone of resignation in her voice. I knew too, from the beginning. When Michael confessed to me, I didn't blame him. After all, it's common for men, isn't it? But when he said he wanted to start a new life. Elizabeth sat down in a chair and began speaking matter-of-factly. To maintain the Brown family's reputation, I wanted to settle it quietly. Linda, we intended to prepare sufficient compensation for you. As for Eric's custody, since Michael is more affluent, naturally. Mother, that's enough, Michael's voice interrupted Elizabeth's words. Let's stop the lies. A heavy silence fell over the room. Outside, street lights swayed quietly. Let me say this, I squeezed out my voice as I slowly stood up. This won't be settled quietly. The next day, I contacted my lawyer. And the prepared documents began to move all at once. Petition for divorce mediation, claims for property division, and petition regarding Eric's custody. At Michael's company, rumors of the vice president's affair with a female employee and their secret child spread in an instant. Considering the impact on clients, the company advised Michael to resign. His social status, at the peak of his career, crumbled fragilely. Elizabeth's unexpected disgrace sent significant ripples through Greenwich's social circles. The trust and respect she had built over many years were about to disappear overnight. That weekend, I took Eric to Mary's villa for shelter. To begin preparations for a new life. Eric stood by the window, gazing at the setting sun. Mom, we'll be okay, right? While embracing my son's small shoulders, I answered with a certain voice. Yes, I'm sure we'll be fine. There's still a lot of happiness waiting for us. In my womb, the little life moved gently. It was as if it were blessing our new beginning. In the living room of our new home, where the gentle autumn sunshine streamed in, I was watching Eric while holding my 3-month-old daughter, Sarah. He was earnestly reading a picture book next to his sister's baby bed. Outside the window, trees beginning to change color swayed gently in the wind, announcing the arrival of a new season. The lavender I planted after moving had taken root and begun to release its fragrance. Sarah, are you listening? Can you hear your big brother's voice? Today it's "Goodnight Moon." At Eric's gentle voice, Sarah reaches out her tiny hand and smiles. Her dark eyes and adorable smile were undoubtedly proof of our mother-child happiness. Every time I see this scene, tears well up in my eyes. Beyond that tumultuous summer, we had certainly begun walking a new life path. This new home, found with Mary's help, though smaller than before, was a comfortable place where warm sunlight and pleasant breezes passed through. White-based wallpaper, gentle wooden flooring, and natural light streaming through the windows added warmth to our new life. I planted lavender in the garden, and from Eric's room, the neighborhood park is visible. On holidays, we spent more time enjoying ourselves with other parents and children in that park. Sarah's birth brought us new hope. I still vividly remember the moving scene when Eric first met his sister in the delivery room. Mom, Sarah really came to us, didn't she? At those words, I hugged him tightly. His anxious voice from that rainy night now seems like a lie. The court's judgment favored us. The amount of punitive damages against Michael far exceeded the lawyer's expectations. The existence of a secret child, planned betrayal, and Eric's psychological distress were all considered. Eric's custody became completely mine, and Michael's visitation rights were strictly limited. The judge particularly emphasized Eric's testimony and the psychological counselor's report. Michael, fired from his company, has since tried several times to return to work, but the impact of the scandal was greater than expected, and he continues to be rejected by every company. In addition to the payment of high damages, the burden of child support for Kate and Emma also weighs heavily. Kate eventually left him, too. The internal investigation for the company's self-preservation caused their relationship to leave a significant scar on her career as well. The last I heard, Michael had started living alone in a cheap apartment in the suburbs. An unimaginable fall from his once glamorous life. Elizabeth completely disappeared from Greenwich's social circles. Former friends avoided her, and invitations to charity events ceased. The last I heard, she was spending her days in depression, confined to her home. Of course, our path hasn't been smooth. Eric attends child-oriented counseling once a week. The separation from his father, environmental changes, and his sister's birth have all had a considerable impact on his heart. Eric, what did you talk about in counseling today? I talked about Dad too. But I'm not scared anymore. Because I have you and Sarah. At those words, I breathe a sigh of relief. It might take time, but we were definitely walking the path to healing. Community support has been strong too. The neighbors warmly welcomed us, and church groups supported us in various ways. And I myself have taken a new step. It's been decided that from next spring, I'll return as a teacher at a nearby kindergarten. Mom, you'll be a teacher again. That's amazing. Eric showed genuine joy. How reassuring it is to have a son who supports my dreams. Now, surrounded by the scent of lavender in the garden, we can spend peaceful time. Sarah's growth, Eric's smile, and our gradual progress forward. We have found certain happiness in this new form of family. The conversation with a teacher I met during a kindergarten interview the other day also brought fresh joy. He is also raising children as a single father. A small expectation for an unseen future has begun to sprout in my heart. The days when Eric starts piano lessons and Sarah takes her first steps alone shouldn't be far off. New memories are accumulating, one by one, surely. Outside the window, the lavender in the garden sways gently. Having overcome past suffering, we are now becoming a family in the true sense of the word.